The village. Classic, humble beginnings for any adventurer in any form of TTRPG. Yes, in some campaigns you may start off in a city, you may start off on an island, however, almost always, especially in the early games, your adventurers will end up in a village some way, shape, sense, or form. And so, we should probably talk about it, because there's a lot going on with villagers. But before we do, just have a quick thing to run through quickly, which is, hi, I'm Soulfire. If you're checking out this channel, this is my sanctuary for any beginning dungeon master, games master of any form of TTRPG, and the whole point of these videos and this channel is to give you an easy guide into different ideas that you can utilize in your own TTRPG campaigns, whether it being just story plot hooks, character ideas, or just general information about locations to keep in mind to really make sure that whenever you're starting out your campaigns, or if you're in the middle of them, to really just help flesh out your world and make it that much more entertaining for your players. So if you end up liking the idea of this channel, or you like these videos, please end up making sure to give this thing a like, please end up subscribing to the channel if you want to end up seeing more, share it with your friends, please, because it would be cool to have more people end up learning about this, and it will potentially benefit you if your friends are going to be starting out as a dungeon master or games master. Ring the notification bell as well, still need to get used to that one, YouTube, but heyo, that's all of the shilling, and now let's actually get into the meat of the video, shall we? So, villagers. Villagers are great because really they are the start of it all for any of your campaigns. Like, yes, I get it, they're small, they're not as interesting as cities, but they can still be incredibly important, and depending on what level your characters are and how far into the adventure they are, it's really the start of everything, because normally it's a good idea when you're starting out TTRPGs, start them off in a hamlet. So a hamlet is basically a super small village. A hamlet normally will consist of around about 10 to 20 houses-ish, while a village can end up being up to 100. Like, a village can be big. A village can be really big, and it's really important because this is going to be the place that all of your adventurers starting off are going to be able to get all of their resources. It's going to be all low-tier items. Maybe there's going to be one super special item that is maybe a passed-down heirloom of a town hero, or maybe it's owned by a previous adventurer that lives in the village, but that's going to be about it, at least in terms of power scaling for making your village that much more interesting. And really, a village is a blank canvas, because yes, your adventurers are starting out in this village, but it's up to them if they're going to end up deciding that they want to stick around the village, they want to constantly return to this village, or if this is really just going to be a small stop on the roadside of the adventure that they are taking. And this is an important sort of thing to represent. Make sure that when you are starting out with villagers that they really are kind of nondescript. The whole point of a village is really that these are people living out in the middle of essentially nowhere. Not nowhere, it's not going to be Courage the Cowardly Dog's level of nowhere, however, it's still going to be kind of remote. Like, it could be a village in the middle of a forest, it could be a village in the middle of the desert, a village in the middle of the mountains. Villages can pop up just about anywhere, and really just kind of make sure to represent that your villagers have standard methods to live, because one of the hardest things for any village in history is the fact that they have struggled with getting essential resources. Things like food, water, housing, all of that stuff, all very important. So when you are establishing your villages, especially when you're writing it up for your campaigns, make sure to plan out where they're getting their water sources from, and make sure to figure out how they are getting fed. If they're going to be a merchant village where they are receiving imports from other towns and cities nearby, that's an important thing, because if they don't have a sustainable, reliable way to end up establishing food or water, those resources can be cut off. And depending on your storytelling, you can make that whole plot line. You could have a village struggling with their food management because of the simple case that bandits keep on cutting off the town's food supply, which is a whole quest line in and of itself, not only to stopping the bandits, but to figuring out why and who is benefiting from it, because there's always someone who's going to be benefiting from bandits in some way. Aside from that, really just remember that a village has a few core buildings that make it a thriving ecosystem for your villagers, being the case that one, it will end up having, of course, a tavern, because being in a medieval setting, in any setting, or even any other setting, it can be hard, it can be difficult. Sometimes people just want to drink and just have a party. Like, you know, it's been a long day. Someone please get me a coffee because my feet hurt and I just want to sit down and I'm not doing okay, but it's fine. I've got my drink, it's all right. Aside from that, though, you also have buildings like the mayor's hall. Like, not every village will have a mayor. Maybe they've just got a village guardian, village elder. Someone is important to the village, the main focal point of the village, the people that everyone in the village turn to. And they've got a house, and that's an important location. It doesn't have to be grand, it doesn't have to be big, but it is a center point for story events that will potentially happen in said village, so do make sure to pay attention to that. The only other things which are really important are probably going to be a form of stables. Horses are important, and if not horses, methods of transportation are important, so having a form of stable is always essential for a village, mostly at minimum to explain where messengers go, because, you know, messengers from cities and everything have to be able to deliver information to this village. Not all of the time, granted, sometimes it'll just be a random rider in the night that comes into your village to end up delivering information. But on average, there's probably some form of stable. And it doesn't have to have horses available for your party to take out, or it might. That's the fun part of TTRPGs. They can have whatever you want inside them. The important part is really just to try and remember the important focal points of what makes a village actually work. Now, the only other final things really for essential buildings in a village is going to be obviously your major farmhouse. Like, if your village is making its own food, then yes, it's going to have some form of farmer shop, because that's where the farmer lives, that's where they're going to be delivering their goods to the rest of the village, and that can be an important building, in case that it's the easiest sustainable way to get food for longer travels. And if not, then maybe there's going to be some form of general shop, because if you don't have a farm, then you're going to need to buy food, and where are you going to buy food from? The general store. I mean, you can have a farm and a general store at the same time, nothing wrong with that. It's just, if you're only going to have one, then just pick one or the other. You can have both, that's perfectly fine, and normally recommended to make sense as to how this village is becoming that much bigger, but sizing, scaling, and it is up to you at the end of the day. Your general store, mostly just going to have food, going to have some standard adventuring supplies, going to be obviously probably your water flasks, maybe some form of like standard adventuring travel, whether it being sticks to help support people, tents, camping bags, all of that supply stuff, maybe a fire starter kit for creating fires. However, ascending a mountain, depending on where your village is, they might not have that. Like, if you've got a village out in the mountains, yeah, it makes sense that they've got everything that you would need to be able to ascend a mountain. However, if you're just a standard, random farming village in the middle of fields, nowhere near any mountains, yeah, you're probably not going to have the gear for ascending mountains, because, yeah, your adventurers might need it, but they're the only person who's needed it in the last 6 months. Why would they be selling that? And sort of have that along your thinking when stocking your general village stores, because, yes, make sure that what they actually sell and what the village relies on actually makes sense to the location that the village is based around, because it makes no sense for your village in the middle of the desert to end up having like a vast reliance on very dry, very salty food, because it's already dry. They need water, they need sustenance from things like that. Yes, it helps them last longer, but believe me, when you're already dehydrated, the last thing you really want to be munching on is hardtack. That's going to be the last thing they're going to want. Doesn't mean that they don't have it, but they're not going to have much of it, because they're going to have other methods that are at least going to help quench their thirst. And only a few other things around villages to really hopefully get you inspired about how fun they can be is storytelling, because your village is great. Your starting village is such a beautiful blank canvas for your storytelling that you can do just so much with the idea, right? Because yes, people can come and go. Yes, your adventurers probably aren't going to spend forever in this village, but you can still easily establish a connection with your players to the village, quite easily, especially if you focus around 2 to 3 sessions inside this one village. Have them start to meet people. Make sure that you end up having town villager names, because That can be important. You don't need it all written down, but maybe a table to end up giving you ideas for village and names, but establish a few core key characters that maybe your adventuring party helps out, whether it being the farmer to help make food, whether it being that a villager has ended up losing a family pet and they ask the adventuring party to go find them because maybe they're lost in the nearby woods. Maybe the village elder has got a problem and they could do with a hand, and maybe they'll give them a special item. Could be a healing potion, could be even a +1 sword. Like, there's lots of small, simple quests that are very run-of-the-mill, right? The important part about it is that you're establishing a connection from your players and the NPCs of that village, which means that they will eventually grow to care about what happens to these villagers, at least for the most part. Some of them they might find very annoying, and if you build it right, that can be a really fun thing. But the important part is that connection gets established, because once there is a connection with the village, your players are going to be more than likely willing to help out the village should something major come along. Because if the village has grown a connection with the adventurers, people start recognizing them, people start thanking them for their work that they're doing, then your adventurers are going to probably want this village to stick around. These people know them, these people like them, these people help them when they need to, and so it's only fair that the adventuring party would want to help them in return in their times of need, whether it being an invading goblin army, whether it being that the entire village is now going through a drought and they need someone to help figure out what's going on. There's a lot of different reasons as to why you want your adventurers to establish that connection to a village, but it's important because it's a very, very, very handy method to help drive the plot forwards as being a games master. Because that way then you can have it lead into other plot elements if they are helping out this small village. And you don't need to do it with every village, but at least probably when you're starting out in your campaigns, having one core village is very, very useful. And as a final tip, the whole really powerful thing about establishing a strong connection with a village in the early game of your TTRPGs is that when you end up getting into the mid and to the late game, depending on what happens to that village can really make a lasting impact. I'm not saying to all the time, but a really powerful, strong story beat is to have that village get attacked when the party isn't there. Like, it hurts. There might be characters that die, but the reason why is it is a very powerful method to show off your villain. It's a very powerful method of showing off the force that they can deliver and how uncaring they are to the standard person of the world. And it also reinforces in your adventurers that the reasons as to why they are wanting to stop your villain. Like, it is an incredibly strong motivator to get them to either seek revenge in some way upon the people that they have cared about, upon the village that they have taken care of. Maybe they even set up their home there, and the villain to come in and burn it to the ground is devastatingly brutal and an incredibly powerful storytelling motif. It has been used in other stories a lot, but it's used because it's powerful, it's used because it's effective, and it's not something you should just throw in on a whim. It's a powerful storytelling tool, yes, but you shouldn't overuse it, and you should definitely not just fire it off early and think that it's going to be effective. You need to establish those connections. You need to spend time with that village. You need to get your players to really care about what happens to it. So having smaller scale things, like an invasion that your adventurers can stop, is a great way to see if your players actually care about what's going on with the village, because they have two options. They can either help defend it or they can run away. Depending on what they choose will really tell you how much of a connection they have established. Are they going to try and save everyone in that village? Are they going to try and get everyone out and just leave the village to burn because at the end of the day they're just buildings and not the people? Or are they going to stand their guard? Are they going to stand on business and be prepared to go down with this village to try and save it? There's so much different results that can happen from this, and so many different endpoints that your campaign can go from, just from those few small interactions. And then you can have it scale up, because maybe they did save the village, maybe they did save everyone, and suddenly nearby towns and cities are singing the praises of these adventurers because they managed to help save this entire village. Or they didn't. Maybe they didn't save everyone. Maybe they couldn't. And that can really hurt your adventurers, because yeah, maybe they did save as many people as they could, but they couldn't save everyone. They weren't fast enough, they weren't strong enough, they weren't powerful enough to actually save everyone. And depending on how it's framed, depending on what you do with it, and depending on how they react to it, that can really impact your players. Maybe it's going to be a solid motivating factor for the entirety of the rest of the campaign to make sure that they do not fail ever again. And that is the power of a village in your TTRPGs. Small, nondescript, not super unique, but done right, can be incredibly powerful and incredibly long-lasting in your campaigns. Just make sure that you know a few core things about your village. Know who your characters that represent the village are. Learn things about them. Give them something important, give them unique character traits. We will talk about characters at some point going forwards in one of these videos, so if I have set it up, maybe there's a link somewhere for you to end up finding it. But the important part is just to remember that these aren't just a few buildings in the middle of nowhere. These are a home for a people, and your adventurers will interact with them. Potentially they can grow to care about them, to the point where they're even willing to risk their own lives to save them. And that is the beauty of villages in TTRPGs. Either way, I hope you ended up liking this video. Please end up, again, liking, subscribing, sharing this with your friends if you want to end up seeing more of this stuff. And if you have any questions, comments, or you want to end up bringing up a topic for me to end up talking about in these videos, please make sure to write it down in the comments and bring the notification bell if you want to keep up to date with all of this stuff. In the meantime, I've been Solfire. This is my sanctuary of a channel for all the wayward DMs and games masters of the world. And until the next time, my friends, I hope you have a good one. Bye-bye.